This is 0612 TV.
Welcome aboard.
Hello and welcome back to our very last episode on the command line interface. Today, we want to wrap up the series by considering some alternatives to the Windows command line. As you know, when you press start and you type CMD, that command prompt you're seeing is actually basically based off the old MS-DOS operating system, but that is not the only command line in existence. In fact, if you're running macOS, any version of Linux, and that includes Android phones or working with Unix servers, the command line you actually use and interact with is slightly different. The actual syntax of the commands are also slightly different, but as you probably can guess, at its most basic level, things are still the same. So of course, at the end of the day, you're still going to need to have commands to actually browse between directories, create new directories, copy files, move files, delete files, all that same kind of stuff. So today I'm going to show you a number of different command lines. I'm going to show you where the commands are different, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up the series. So without further ado, let us jump right in. What I have right now is I have VirtualBox running. For those of you who don't know, VirtualBox is a program written by Oracle, and what it does is if you have an ISO of an operating system, it will actually run it in a window. So yes, right now I actually have Slacks Linux running in a window on my desktop right now. I have the console open, and this is what it looks like. In essence, really, it's the same thing. A big black box with a blinking cursor. So let's take a look at some commands. Instead of dir to list your directory, you type ls. cd works the same way, except now, well, things are a little bit more strict. File names are actually case sensitive, so you do need to get the capitalization correct. This actually applies across the board, by the way. If you're using a Unix console and you want to refer to a file, when you type out the file name, it is actually case sensitive. Notice that in Windows, it doesn't actually matter. I can get the case all wrong and the command still works as expected. However, that's generally not the case on a Unix operating system. Now, most of the basic file manipulation commands have actually been shortened. What that means is instead of typing out copy, you type cp. Instead of typing out move, you type mv. Instead of typing out delete as in del, you have to type rm, which stands for remove. However, at the heart of things, the parameters are the same, the way the command works is the same, it's really just the actual name of the command itself. The only command that's actually longer in Unix consoles is the clear screen command. In the Windows command line, it was cls. In Unix command lines, it is clear. So that's essentially most of the more important commands that, well, we've now translated into a language that Unix understands. So I guess that's most of the commands that we have tried and familiarized ourselves with in the Windows command line that we now know how to call in the Unix command line. But how about the other features? Does redirection and pipes and Control Z, that kind of stuff, does it work the same? Well, you'll be happy to know that redirection and pipes work in the exact same way. Control C works in the exact same way. The only difference is instead of Control Z to indicate end of input in a Windows command line, you use Control D in the Unix command line. A very minor difference, but very much worth noting because if you mix these two up, things might not turn out the way you expect. So why is there a Unix version of the command line and a Windows version of the command line? And more importantly, why must we burden our memory with both? Well, you see, if you ever get a chance to actually work with commercial servers, chances are most of the time they actually run a Unix operating system. I mean, in general, there isn't very much of a use to install Windows on a computer that's going to act as a server, which is why most of the time a lightweight operating system like Unix is installed, and it generally does the job just as well. Here's something interesting, by the way. If you're actually working with, a commercial Unix server, and say you want to make some configurations or some changes, it's generally not possible for you to just go up to the server and start doing things to it. Instead, you can actually do this from home, or your office, or wherever. This is done remotely via a protocol called SSH, Secure Shell Host, or Telnet, which is the slightly older version and I guess less secure. But yeah, this is actually a prime example of remote computing. Because here's the deal, what you have installed locally is an SSH client. All this client does is it will connect to whatever server you tell it to connect to, and of course provided that you can authenticate yourself, whatever the server sends you, which essentially is just a stream of text, will be displayed to you by this client. And essentially what you type will also be sent back to the server and displayed on screen as well on this client. The result of this is that you get a console window. You can actually interact with it like a normal console, Except none of the computing is happening locally. Much of the computing is actually happening at the far end on the server. So to wrap up this video, I'm going to actually connect to my school's Unix server using an SSH client called PuTTY, and notice that I can actually interact with the console absolutely normally, but this computation is not even happening on my computer. Incidentally, since I'm here, I also want to show you a text editor. Remember last time I tried to show you edit and that didn't work out quite well because I didn't actually have edit on my computer? Well, I'll show you another text editor called Vim. We actually have to use this in school to write code. It's not the most friendly environment in the world, but yeah, here you go. Here's an example of a command line text editor. While we are on the subject of writing files using the console, note that copycon isn't a feature available on the Unix operating systems, so we use a slightly different command and we use redirects. To write a text file from the command line, type cat write redirect file name and then hit enter and go ahead and compose your text file. Remember that instead of using Ctrl Z to indicate the end of your input, you now have to use Ctrl D. To see the contents of the text file, simply type cat and the file name. This means of course that the cat command is essentially the equivalent of the type command. And well, that's all there is for this episode and in fact this series on the command line interface. Let us now very quickly recap some of the ideas that we went through. We started off looking at some basic commands, just how the command line works in general. We then looked briefly at the concept of command switches and how they work like options in a GUI program. We then moved on to take a closer look at the concept of parameters, which is essentially giving a program some more information to work on. We then moved on to look at some file and directory manipulation commands such as make directory, copy, move, and delete. And we also took a minute to actually look at the whole idea of the word con and its significance to command line operations in general. After which we moved on to look at Ctrl Z and Ctrl C, these special characters that influence the console in certain ways. Finally, we looked at pipes and redirection, how we actually move streams of text from one command to another or from a command to a file. And finally, today's episode, we took a look at the Unix command line and how some of the commands are actually different from the MS-DOS versions. So there you go, this is I guess a very rough look at command lines in general. And well, that's all there is for this episode and in fact this series on the command line interface. I hope you learned something. I know it's not something that you can apply, I guess, in day-to-day life, but hey, it's worth knowing. If you have any comments, queries or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to check out the official Twitter for this channel at twitter.com/0612tv. As always, I appreciate every like, favorite and subscription you give me. But until next time, you're watching 0612TV.